Well, let's bring in our Tuesday panel, Sky News hosts Liz Storer and Paul Murray.
Howdy.
Great to see you both. Paul, look, this is one way for the Prime Minister and Labor to cosy up to the business community, offer them all flights on the Prime Minister's plane when they can afford it, but they probably don't want to risk having their plane running late.
Well, I remember literally the day before the Jobs Summit, there was a Business Council event that was in Sydney, and in the papers the following day, the suggestion was that all of those names that you've just read out had all travelled on the Prime Minister's plane. This, of course, was when every CEO in the country was trying to get as close as possible to the new Prime Minister, hoping that whatever the new broom would be would end up sweeping their way. But of course, all of those people were used as window dressing in the Jobs Summit for what the unions ultimately wanted. Many of those CEOs and organisations have now come out in charge, and I've got to say, you didn't ask me about it, but how good's the judgment of Peter Dutton? He didn't go to the Jobs Summit where those people were used as props, and his position when it comes to the Voice is now where the majority of Australians are.
I think it's interesting, the Productivity Commission, my recollection is they weren't invited to that summit. Now there's a new Productivity Commissioner, Danielle Wood, appointed just on Thursday last week, and now the front page of the paper today is that she supports inheritance taxes. So.
But you see, she gave a speech 2 days earlier, and that was some good spin from the Senator. She knows how to push. But the reality is that the only reason that, for want of a better term, scares can catch on is if people think that it's plausible you're going to do it. The whole Mediscare situation, of course, was not government policy of the Turnbull government in 2016, but it was a back office where they were discussing, well, this option or this option.
Oh, yeah.
But because the Labor Party made it plausible that it could happen, we got Mediscare.
Oh,
so they're going to start
large on core flukes on election day. You'd think it was the real thing.
Yeah. Liz, do you think it's an issue that the High Court judges who are going to be presiding over this case between the Transport Workers Union and Qantas do have the perk of the Chairman's Lounge?
I don't know that it is a concern because I'm sure they take their job far more seriously than that. I'm in utter awe of High Court judges. They are the biggest brains in the country. So I'd like to think that their judgment in such a case as this would not be swayed by cheap, well, actually, they're not cheap, they're free cocktails, steaks, etc. and so on. But what a stitch up. I think this more reflects on Qantas. You've got all the lawmakers in your pocket. We all know the MPs are there for free. And now we find out you've got the judiciary in your pocket as well. Pretty incredible. Although, yes, as I say, I'd like to think that certainly it wouldn't actually sway your brains that big.
Yeah. Now, overseas now, the Wall Street Journal is reporting, Paul, that the Democrats are getting worried about Joe Biden being their candidate. It comes after he gave this bizarre press conference in Vietnam off the back of the G20 summit. Let's have a look.
We talked about at the conference overall, we talked about stability. We talked about making sure that the third world, the Southern Hemisphere had access to changes, had access. It wasn't confrontational at all.
Thank you, everybody. This ends the press conference. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
I should say we didn't add that music. That music came with the clip. It's been reported that his staff wrapped up his speech and got him off there. But he's also been criticised, Paul, for his handling of the 22nd anniversary of the September 11 terror attacks.
Yeah, he didn't go to New York, he didn't go to Pennsylvania, he didn't go to DC because of the time zones and moving back from Vietnam. He ended up in an Air Force base in Alaska. Put simply, he turned a refuelling stop into his moment to say what he wanted to say, including, yet again, misremembering, otherwise known as lying, about when he actually first went to Ground Zero in New York City. He claims that it was, the next day he was there.
The very next day.
He wasn't there until another week, and that was after George W. Bush had been there.
And he's written that in his own book, that he was in the Senate on the 12th of September that year. So just incredible.
Let's have a look at him misremembering those remarks. Here it is.
I remember standing there the next day and looking at the building. I felt like I was looking through the gates of hell. It looked so devastating.
The issue, though, back to the press conference. I had some fun with this last night on telly. Great video on YouTube. Go check it out. He had a 6-minute answer to a question about climate change that involved referring to John Wayne movies and dog pace,
it was
pony
bizarre.
mile. Like literally, it's just this wandering nonsense, right?
And literally said that climate change was a bigger threat than nuclear war.
But he just was all over the shop, and again, moving around like he was some sort of odd televangelist. You thought it was a hard job to be the press secretary for Donald Trump. It's a harder job being the press secretary for this guy because you have to pretend that people didn't just see what they saw. But amazingly, at about 1 o'clock in the morning, Sunday into Monday, I was watching all of this live and I watched Sky UK, BBC, CNN, Fox, MSNBC, all available on Fox or Flash, God love you. Guess what? No one's reaction to the back of the press conference was, that was weird. And Liz, that's what sends me crazy. At what point does this have to become too weird?
At what point indeed? I mean, it was only a matter of months ago. He told a pile of grieving soldiers' families that, oh, yeah, my son Beau, he also died overseas in war. Mate, we all know Beau Biden died of brain cancer. How many times? And in some ways it's hard to know because we know he's senile, he's mentally struggling, but that also means that you can get away with murder because we're all like, do you know that you're lying?
Yeah.
Or you know, we don't know what you know.
Yeah.
But he can get away with it because of his mental condition. People are like, well, we don't want to be disingenuous. Is that genuinely your recollection? Because obviously people with this kind of mental health issue, they don't know.
But it's very sad. But the problem is he is likely to be the Democratic candidate. And this is why
And
the Wall
win.
Street Journal is reporting that there are concerns about him being the president again. I mean, Paul, who are the other contenders that could... I mean, there's suggestions that Michelle Obama could run. But is this realistic?
No, look, if it's not Biden, they will try to go to Harris, but they'll have to test her numbers whether they're any better than they were. Remember, going into 2020, she couldn't even get to the first round of the primaries, right? So she's not even popular with Democrats. Whether that changes because she's inheriting the Biden legacy.
And by the way, she started giving media interviews, Kamala Harris, where she said that she's happy to step in if necessary.
Gavin Newsom is the governor of California. Gretchen Whitmer is the governor of Michigan. Either way, that could be the 1-2 ticket out of it. But the reality is that with the Republicans steaming towards Trump the way they currently are, with the likelihood that the states that will matter is Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, the maths, even with the absurdity of this bloke, still are on Biden's side.
Utterly absurd. And how does anyone explain the fact that the Dems have had 4 years to prepare for this? Joe Biden was already struggling mentally. There were challenges of like, let's do a mental health test. Trump loved throwing that gauntlet down. Never did it, of course. But absolutely nothing has been done to raise up another successor. It's as if they fully planned all along to just keep propping up what's left of him because whoever's running the country, he's clearly not, likes that job.
Yeah. And we should also point out that this isn't an age thing. We're not sitting here being ageist because there are a lot of people in the 80s or even 90s who are extremely sharp.
No, correct. But again, exactly the sensitivity to not offend anyone who is of equal or older age to Joe Biden is part of the political shield of he gets to be able to get away with it. This individual, Joe Biden, is not up to it. Joe Biden himself.
But the leader
not
of the free
necessarily
world, to be, the smartest, the most intelligent person.
Sharpest knife in the drawer.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't come down to age because, as I remember discussing with you some weeks ago when you did a great interview with John Howard, he's 4 years older than Joe Biden and still sharp as a tack. So age genuinely has nothing to do with it. It's about mental acuity, and the Commander-in-Chief does not have any.
All right, Liz Storer, Paul Murray, we'll see you 9 o'clock tonight, 10 o'clock tonight for your new Hour of Power.